This is Jeff Fedotin with Believe in Chiefs on the Believe Network, Kansas City's #1 sports podcast network, the only place with a show for every team in KC and more. We believe in our teams. Do you believe? On this week's show, former Kansas City Chiefs offensive lineman Joe Valerio and I recap the NFL draft. So, Joe, what do you think of the Chiefs' selections here?
I thought they were really good. I thought they were really good. I would, I think a lot of the prognosticators and pundits have given them, anywhere from a B to a B plus. And I think that's good. I think that's fair. I mean, obviously, when you're picking that late in each round, or relatively late in each round, it's, when you win the Super Bowl, it's pretty tough to get that A plus draft, that A plus pick, because you're kind of always on your heels, right? I mean, you're always thinking, all right, well, who's left? And, they didn't really have anybody to jockey position for or whatnot. So I think given that, I think it was solid. I think it was a solid draft for a team that, has needs, right? Every team has needs. Even though you win the Super Bowl, you still have positions.
But they probably have fewer needs than just about everybody. They're a pretty complete team.
Yeah. So they have more they have things to fill back, they have depth to create, right? There wasn't any, glaring position that, they were going to need. I mean, still, I think offensive tackle's probably, the position that is the need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously Lucas Niang right now is filling that spot on the roster, but he still hasn't played. He hasn't, he hasn't he's not even as much of a question mark as Andrew Wiley might have been last year. He was still a starter.
At some Wiley point had a lot of games. He had a track record. He had a lot of Niang. Not only has he been hurt, I remember Grunny was saying how he's teams have seen something that they could do with Niang. He didn't look that. In his limited opportunities, he didn't look that great. Now, he was a really good in college, a guy the Chiefs were excited about, but a lot, that's a big question mark right now.
Yeah, so I guess, edge rusher, defensive end, they felt was a bigger need, and to provide some depth there with, Frank Clark departing, which obviously there were rumors he could come back, but, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right? But that's the one thing I thought when I was going into this thing. I think I thought more and more about it. Was that, as I looked at every position, where the holes were that they needed to fill, I thought, man, if they could get a really solid tackle,
mm-hmm.
That they could plug in and I mean really challenge. Not that Wanya Morris can't. I mean, the guy, played at Tennessee, Oklahoma. I mean, he's a big dude. He's got the reach. I think he's a mauler. He's got everything I think they're looking for in a right tackle. But still third round. Is he? Could he be the next? Will Shields, right? That they find in the third round that becomes a full-time starter. I mean, hey, who knows, right? But I think that was the one thing that kind of got me thinking as I was really, as the numbers were going down and they're in the 20s, and then they're getting into the mid 20s, and I'm thinking, all right, who's left on this board? Who can they really go after? And I think Felix, Anudike-Uzomah is, I mean, come on, he's homegrown.
Nice work with the pronunciation, Joe.
I got it right. I was working on that.
You're practicing. I was just kind of calling Felix.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But Lee Summit kid, Kansas State, come on, that's a story right there. Yeah. That's a story. And that's in the draft, you got to find those, right? And I think I always think back to the certain strategies that GMs and coaches take when they're trying to build a team, right? And I always go back to the Marv Levy Bills, the 4 Super Bowl Bills, and I think about the 1AA and Division II players that he had on that roster. And I always think, there was some method behind that madness. Why does he carry so many Division II and 1AA players, now obviously called the FCS? But and my theory was, he knew if he had a group of those guys on the roster, they were going to show up every day and work their butts off, right? Because nothing was given to them. They hadn't already played their professional career, right? Like some guys who play at the big schools, right? The Power Five. So I think there's a method to this thing with bringing someone like Felix in who's local. It's just going to add a flavor. He provides a depth, and when you're the Super Bowl champion, you don't have a whole lot of holes to fill. Then I think it's a really good pick. So I think I give them, considering where they were, I would give them a solid B plus for this. I don't think it just wasn't an A draft for them, and that's okay. I mean, I don't think anybody expected them to have an A draft. What was Brett going to do with some of the limited money that they have?
Yeah, and I think we've gotten a little spoiled by Brett Veach just pulling a rabbit out of his hat every time, given where the Chiefs are picking. Joe, I'm going to give my take on the draft here and what I thought of the selections. But first, a word from our sponsor. BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds, lines, including the latest player reports for this year's NBA playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs: baseball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. Joe, who am I to question Brett Veach? Because he's done such an amazing job in the draft, getting guys like Creed Humphrey, Nick Bolton in the same second round. You kidding me? To get Isaiah Pacheco in the 7th round. So I do trust him, but I don't think he quite knocked it out of the park like he usually does. And I'm going to go through what I think some of the good questionable things. Mm-hmm. Second round, obviously, I like Rashee Rice's size. He's 6'1", 204, and his production. He led all of FBS with 112.9 yards per game. That's really amazing stuff. But Joe, there were other wide receivers I like better, and they traded up in other spots. I really would have liked them maybe when the run of receivers were going in the first, maybe go with that, or there's some guys I like better in the second round. I'm really interested in their defensive back they took in the 4th round, Connor from Virginia Tech. I actually don't know much about him, but I really respect Daniel Jeremiah of the NFL and Network, the analyst there. Was on a couple conference calls with him. He's really sharp, and he loved this guy. So that makes me excited about him. The 3rd round, Joe, I was hoping they were going to grab. We had talked a couple pods ago about Darnell Washington, how much we liked him, the huge guy from Georgia. He's super fast despite being just a mammoth guy. Boy, he would have been fun to pair with Kelsey and maybe even eventually supplant him one day. He can block, he can catch. But the Steelers grabbed him right before us in a 3rd, and I thought that was a great pick by the Steelers. I thought that was a little bit of a miss by the Chiefs. And I was wondering, so 2 more points, Joe, then I want to get your feedback on this. I was wondering if there was a little bit of pressure for the Chiefs to pick in the 1st round. It was so cool how they wrapped it up with a Kansas State guy. It was such a cool production. They start with Stone Street and Mahomes and Kelsey, and Anudike-Uzomah. I think they could have gotten back in maybe the second round. So I want to, normally I think they might have traded back, but they might have been a little bit more cautious with the draft in Kansas City. What I do like about him, one of the youngest players in the draft, turned just 21 in January. So that's what excites me about him. But I kind of wish, Joe, that they would have got the Eagles, right before that, got Nolan Smith. What a great pick. He's just like same measurables as Hassan Reddick, was super productive in Georgia for yet another Georgia guy. They're like the Philadelphia Bulldogs now. Boy, they had a good draft. And so, Joe, that was my getting into the weeds a little bit. I get excited draft time. Those are my takes on the individual guys. So I thought, I'm never going to say that Brett Veach has a bad draft. His track record is too good, but I didn't love this draft.
Yeah, it was a tough draft all around. I mean, just in their defense, and I think let's talk about the Eagles, because I think I don't think there's anybody who doesn't think that they didn't crush the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I think they really won the draft. I mean, if the draft were a game, the draft for the Super Bowl, I think they won it. As far as, but look, who knows how everybody's gonna work out. I think Howie Roseman, he's aggressive like Brett Beach. He knows how to wheel and deal, and I thought that they really, really, really did a good job with the draft. But that's not to say, they traded up to get Jalen Carter. And, you and I have talked about him here and there. Listen, there's still a little bit of a question mark there, whether he's going to be able to translate to the NFL locker room. Now, I think he would have done well in either the Eagles or the Chiefs from like a veteran leadership perspective, and the kind of like DNA that's running through those locker rooms. When you've got people like Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes at the helm as your quarterback, I think the veteran defenders that you have that would take them under their wing, that are going to do the same thing on Eagles defensive line, you parallel to the Chiefs defensive line. So, it's tough. The draft is tough when you're looking at players you don't really know, who they are and what they're going to be all about. So, but nonetheless, regardless of Jalen Carter's, questionable off the field stuff, I think the Eagles still knocked it out of the park, and I could be seeing an Eagles Chiefs, rematch, well, then you throw in the DeAndre Swift trade, right? And what they did at running back. I mean, you got into, I mean, the Eagles are loaded, and they're definitely on paper right now, definitely the team to beat in the NFC for sure. And we could easily be looking at a Chiefs Eagles rematch come February of next year. So, I was kind of excited about that, being local here in Philadelphia and seeing what they did in the draft. But Jeff, tell us about the draft though itself. I mean, you were there. Like, tell us what that whole experience was like for listeners that couldn't attend, and being on the media side of it, and what you were able to experience, because it looked, from everything that I saw on television, it looked like it was a lot of fun.
It very cool. Kansas City did a great job. The final numbers they released Monday: 312,000 people over a 3-day period, a little higher than projections of 300,000. And I think that's the second highest. Nashville had 600. I think 312 is the second highest since the draft started moving from New York. And it was really beautifully done. Union Station, what they did with the TV screens on the 3 main windows in front. The other thing, Joe, what struck me was just so mammoth. For the people who are listening in Kansas City, so basically in front of Union Station, that's where all the fans could gather and watch the theater. But then all these events have the NFL experience. There's fun interactive events. Where especially catered to kids, but 40 times you can run the gauntlet, you can put on pads, you can see the Lombardi trophies. Joe, that was all the way up on Liberty Memorial, which is lit up at night and looked awesome. But to go up there, you had to go. That's really hilly, a lot of steps. That was a real hike, and just to get beyond there, so it was massive. That was the thing. So it was a very cool event. Now, for me, actually, journalistically, everyone I talked to fan wise said, I interviewed some people for some stories, and they said how much they liked the draft. They liked how one woman I spoke to said that she liked how big it was and how it was kind of separated. So, if you didn't want kids to be around all the booze and alcohol, there were up near the Liberty Memorial and stuff, but it was really mammoth. For me, all the press conferences in the media workroom, that was just in the Westin Crowd Center, which is right next to it. And that's kind of where I spent most of the draft in basically a hotel ballroom, just waiting for these press conferences. It's a little less exciting for me. I saw it coming in, all the fans, but it was so. If I walked back through the through the main area in front of Union Station, like between picks, I would have missed all the press conferences because it's so big and there's so many people. So for me it was a little less exciting, but I think the fans really liked it. This is interesting too, that if you actually attend a draft, because it was like this when I attended the ones in Chicago, and it was consistent with the one in Kansas City, you can't actually watch the draft um, from the main areas where the fans. What I mean by this is you can't watch the telecast. They don't have NFL Network or ESPN. In between the picks, they have just highlights or music, which is kind of weird. It's like, I don't know why they do that. If I was a fan, if I was, there as a fan, I would kind of, but an unbelievable scene they did there. And what's really neat, Joe, is they have, it's like Super Bowl week now. There's so many events. Kelsey Jam, he had his concert and festival on Friday night at the old Sandstone in Bonner Springs. Isaiah Pacheco and Derek Johnson had an event for USAA on Thursday afternoon. So it was so much going on in the city that's what made it very cool. But I'm sure the people out there listening who attended had a much more exciting, fun time than I did as I was sitting in a ballroom in the West End Crowd Center.
Well, hey, everybody's got to get that perspective though, right? Because that, everybody thinks it's sometimes, super, super sexy, right, to be in the media. And here it is, when you're really covering it, you're working and you're busy and you're not really taking in sometimes the whole atmosphere of it, right? It's just kind of like, when you're covering a game, even sometimes, right? When you're up in the press box, it's a little sterile up there, right? Maybe you don't hear the crowd noise as much or whatever. So yeah, it's covering games is definitely it's work. And I think that's awesome that you could give that kind of perspective, that everybody thinks, oh, how lucky Jeff had probably the pass to be in the draft and to get a little backstage and do all that. And you're like, well, yeah, I had the pass and all, but it's like, it's not as sexy as you think it is, right? Which is interesting. So, and that actually makes me appreciate what you do even more, right? As far as covering it, because it's a grind, and that's really cool that to give people that perspective, because it is, and that is interesting. You might have to put that in the suggestion box for maybe
Roger to actually show the telecast.
If Roger Goodell's listening, to our pod, give the fans something to do in between, because it's just kind of like, what do? Do you look at your phone? Do you have it on your, the NFL app or something, or your local cable app, and you're watching the live? Because that's the fun of the draft. Those
to watch the highlights and all those of the guys.
Yeah, like those 15 minutes between picks. It doesn't sound like a long time, but let me tell you, that's a long time. 15 minutes between each pick is a long time to be sitting there wondering, what the team's doing, who's left on the board. You got to check your phone and things like that. So maybe they should broadcast the actual, heck, if it's the NFL putting on the draft, why not play the NFL Network? They own it. So
that's what they had in the Westin and stuff. I was like, there was a little place where you could through the window, so I'd go there occasionally and just check out the scene a little bit. But you're not outside, so you're not in the element and hearing it. But they had the main NFL Network feed, so with the audio and stuff. The insidery nuggets I could give of some of the players. One, like Bryce Young, extremely eloquent. I thought is all he wanted to know when he was going up to the stage, because it takes a while for those guys to do media. It's such a large area to go from when they're actually when they do the press conference. And all he wanted to know was who was picked number 6. I thought that was kind of interesting that he was that interested in the draft and the other guys going, that he wanted that. And he is a pretty slight guy. He's as advertised. On the other side, boy, Anthony Richardson, he is a big dude, Joe. He is for a kid who's rookie, I mean, he doesn't look like a quarterback. He looks like a tight end or something. And then the third insider nugget I thought was, so 17 players were there in the green room, and 13 of them got picked in the first round. The other guys decided, all right, well, guys like Will Levis, Joey Porter, and Keon White of the Patriots, who the Patriots ended up picking, they're like, you know what, we're gonna go home. And I thought that was a bad look. I thought stay for the moment. You can make yourself look good in front of the media. But one guy did stay for the second round, Brian Branch, a safety who the Lions drafted. And he was very impressive, and people were I think it was a good thing that he stayed. I think he made himself sound even better. And he's like, you know what? I wanted the vibe. It was really cool in Kansas City, to be able to shake Goodell's hand. He's like, I wanted to stick around. So that was kind of interesting. He struck me as a very mature and humble guy by doing that. So those are my kind of insider nuggets from the players themselves.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I mean, How about like fan reactions? Were the fans pretty well behaved? Like when people got picked, there wasn't any booing or anything. Like I always go back to the old Donovan McNabb, right? My hometown of Philly, right? Oh my God, they booed Donovan McNabb when he gets drafted by the Eagles, and like what did you sense anything like that? Was it
I
pretty?
did, some of the articles said that there was some booing and stuff, but again, since I was so far removed, kind of inside, not near the that I couldn't get that part. I really couldn't get a sense of. Again, it's funny that I feel almost people watching on TV got a better sense of that while I was actually at the press conferences. But the one thing I want to say is Kansas City did I mean, nobody cares about what the media people. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that it was really cool. Like Joe, like when I was leaving the second night, Friday night after rounds 2 and 3, so I'm walking back after doing my stories, my interviews, and like Motley Crue is playing. I mean, that's in front of you. I'm like, that is really cool. And they had a concert every night. So
that's awesome.
Credit to KC for
I just asked that because it just, listen, whether somebody picks the person that you personally thought or not, right? Like this is a young person's future, and it should be an exciting time for them. And as a fan, you should give every player and every team the benefit of the doubt in a situation like this, because you can boo all you want, you can cheer all you want. Who would have thought, right, Patrick Mahomes would be who he is? Who would have thought, guys who get drafted, Tom Brady would have been who he was, right? It just give the players and the teams the benefit of the doubt, right? Because you don't know, right? We've seen number 1 overall busts. We've seen Mr. Irrelevant become superstar.
Brock Purdy,
right? So just take a breath, enjoy the moment, and give, like I said, I'm going to use this term again, give the players, these young men getting drafted, and the teams the benefit of the doubt, and just cheer and go, like whatever you want to say afterwards, and if that player has a horrible training camp and ends up getting cut, even though they were a first round pick, so be it. But just for this night, just give them a shot, because it's a once in a lifetime thing for these players, and you don't want to, as a fan, take away from it, because you just don't know, right? You can boo, and they could be the greatest player ever, and then you're eating crow, or you could cheer and let it see how it works out, right? So just that's just my only piece of advice for fans. Next time they go to the draft, I didn't get a chance to say it before the draft, but it's definitely something that you hope that everybody takes that kind of tact when it comes to that.
And Joe, as you also point out, you really don't know. Nobody, even the experts, don't know how these guys are going to do. That said, who was your favorite pick the Chiefs made, and who were maybe one a little bit more questionable?
I mean, I think I think I'm really anxious to see how Felix turns out, right? And Anudike-Uzomah, right? I said it again. I've probably been practicing. Look, I'm always excited about a player who can turn on the heat at a position like that, right? Why not? Let him pin his ears back, let him get after it, and see how it turns out, right? If he gets into that rotation, right, with George, with George and everybody else, if he can, kind of get moving, on that. I mean, because obviously he's going to have Omena, who is going to be, bringing up a really nice, veteran person to be behind. So I'm actually, I'm kind of I'm excited about that pick. I think it was, it'll be really fun to watch, to watch them kind of, do their thing. I think the Rashee Rice pick was great. I give that a B plus A minus. I think he's, like you said, you mentioned his size.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, why not? Right. I mean, I think Wanya Morris is a good pick. I mean, he he transfers to Oklahoma from Tennessee. Was very highly regarded coming out of high school. I think he's kind of. I'm just looking at it. I don't want to be Pollyanna about it. I think he's a steal. That he could go, that far down and still make it. It's tough. It's tough when you get down into the lower rounds, but I think the Chiefs did a great job in dipping down all the way to the 7th round, and adding depth with Nick Jones at corner. I mean, I think he's a steal, right? I mean, I think that was a good pick. I mean, Keandre Coburn. That's a lot to say. A lot of K's and C's there. Look, he's a stout guy. I mean, I don't think it was. I think it was probably maybe the lowest graded pick of the draft for them. But it's a 6th round. You get down there. I mean, look, you play at Texas, big school. They do need more depth at defensive tackle. I'm glad the Chiefs focused on defense pretty much in this draft. I think I think B.J. Thompson was a good pick. I mean, look, I can just sit here and list and go through player by player, but another super athletic pass rusher, right? I mean, this whole edge position is becoming a thing, right? And not that it hasn't been a thing, but it's really, I mean, when you look at it, it's really becoming a thing to get these super athletic players out there. And I think, he's obviously smaller school guy and nice to have a guy like that on the roster. So I could go through them one by one, but I think it was a good pick. But I'd have to say probably, I'd probably say the Rashee Rice pick was probably could be the one that has the most impact, even though I think the Felix Anudike-Uzomah pick was going to have a great PR play to it and just a community cultural feel to it. I think the Rashee Rice probably the one where he could have the most impact early on.
And one of the ways to look at it is it wasn't a sexy draft by the Chiefs, but it also wasn't a sexy draft overall. And Eric Edholm talked about how unpredictable it was, that's whatever, and it certainly was. But also, next year, a lot of people are saying that is going to be the draft. You have Caleb Williams, who already won a Heisman Trophy, that is Mahomes-like in his qualities. He's not going to be Mahomes, clearly. He's a unicorn. But Drake May is another great quarterback. You have Marvin Harrison's kid, who, as ridiculous as it sounds, because Marvin Harrison is one of the best receivers I've ever seen. He's a Hall of Famer. He's regarded as an actually better prospect. And so next year's is really loaded, might be a little bit more sexy. So that might be part of it too, Joe.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the depth chart as it stands right now, I know it's super early, right? Probably just thinking about rookies are going to be getting together this week, and they'll be making their trips out, and then you'll start the OTAs and get a little mini campage here and there. But I mean, I don't think anybody's going to crack the lineup. I really don't. I look at who they picked and where they are, and I don't see anybody, but barring injury. Now that takes everything off the table. Somebody gets hurt, but I even think with the competition going into camp, barring injury, as a big disclaimer there, put an asterisk on that. I don't see anybody making an impact. The way that a Creed Humphrey, a Trey Smith, Isaiah Pacheco to a certain degrray, or even
what a ridiculously good pick that was.
Right. I mean, you've got, I guess Willie Gay. I mean, he kind of was a starter, I guess, to a certain degree.
He had some injuries and stuff too.
Yeah. Nick Bolton, was a rookie who played a lot. I just other than and then Rashee Rice and probably Felix, who will get rotation because that's just the way it happens on defense. You have to rotate, right? You can't not play on defense because of just the style of the position, especially an edge rusher like that. I think those will probably be the two guys that will see the most time, and everybody else is almost, almost like a project. Now Wanya Morris could surprise us, right?
That's right. There's a pretty open competition there.
He could be that third rounder that steps up, and if Lucas Niang can't get healthy and can't get the wheels in motion, he's a guy that, unless they have something up their sleeves as far as getting another right tackle out there, I just don't see much left in free agency. That there's definitely going to be a battle there at right tackle, which is where it was last year too. So you got to have that kind of competition. But I don't know, Jeff. I'm looking at this depth chart. I mean, on paper, I'm feeling really good about this team. I really am. And
that might be part of the reason the draft was, the Chiefs didn't have a lot of holes. Like we said, there's such a complete roster, which, last year they did have hole after, they had lost so many guys in the offseason. They did have a lot of holes, and they filled them so capably in the draft. Joe, last thing for you. Am I being a conspiracy theorist with this idea that there was a little bit of pressure on Veach to pick in the first round? That I think he's a good prospect and stuff. And it's not like they made a big reach at the same, but I do think that when they were like deciding, okay, maybe normally a couple years ago, Veach might trade back a little bit, but am I being crazy, you think?
No, listen, Jeff, it's a show, right? Come on. I mean, I think for the sake of the show, and to continue to have a fan base that really appreciates what this team does, why not, right? Why not make it something that everybody's going to remember, and that has a lasting impact? And you kind of, and I know they didn't trade up, but I'm just going to say they move up to get somebody like Felix, even though they probably could have let him slip. I mean, why not, right? Look at this team. They're loaded. I mean, you look at the receiving core now with signing Justin Watson, keeping him back. You got MVS, Kadarius Toney, who, Sky Moore is going to step right in. We know what he can do. The offensive line, going out and signing Juwan Taylor. Tooney's back. Creed, Trey, the right tackle's an open spot. Travis, Patrick, Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon. Like, come on. Like, it's offensively, they're loaded. And the same thing on defense. I just don't think there was anybody at 31 that they were going to get that was going to have an impact. Why not go for something that's going to make this community feel good and give them something to write about for a little while? Lee Summit kid does good, goes to K-State, bam, he's playing for the Chiefs. Like, that's a good story. I don't think you're a conspiracy theorist at all. I think it's what the NFL is. It's a show, right? Look at the draft. Look what the draft has become. Look what the combine's become. Look what OTAs have become, right? It's everything's a show. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying it's a good thing that they give the fans stuff to think about all year long. And I think this pick for them goes right along with it.
And I wasn't so much thinking it's a great story, local kid, K-State guy. I don't think they picked. I don't think they necessarily did that. But I think like to appeal to the masses, I thought he was more a guy that could have it 35, 36. He's a good player with a lot of potential, young guy. But they intentionally, you're like, you know what? We could trade back, or we could kind of just take that. That's kind of what I was thinking. I don't know.
No, and I again, sorry if I went off on a tangent that wasn't even related to your question, but yeah, I think it was kind of rolled in there tangentially.
No, totally.
I think that they wanted to pick in the first round, right? All this hype, this all this setup, everything that goes into the draft. I mean, I think about what that would have meant to the fans. All those red jerseys walking around. Union Station there, you could see them on television. Like, all of a sudden they say, and and the Chiefs, whatever, however they would have announced it, right? That the Giants are taking the Chiefs pick for 2 second rounders, and it was everyone like, oh, come on, like, really. So why not give the fans something to go with?
It's all about the show. Well, if you enjoy this show presented by Bet Online, please subscribe. We're available on your favorite directories: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Luminary, and TuneIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.